Hey, Derek with Cafe Realty here. So, I am a couple of months away from my 10-year anniversary of when I purchased my first property, which was a duplex in historic Clarkdale Mill Village. I wanted to recap that first property that got me into the real estate investment space as I get ready to celebrate 10 long years and fruitful years as a real estate investor. And yeah, want to talk about that. My first deal. So I am heavily involved in the city of Austell and our future land use plans and just future development plans for the city ever since I arrived in 2015. And this story could have easily been about Jonesboro because my first property under contract, let me wind up a little further back. I was purchasing my first property. I knew that one of my biggest expenses was housing. So initially, the way I started off was I turned 30. I was trying to get my life in order. I was just trying to, like, previously in my 20s, I had just tried to start up all sorts of myriad of business. And I thought I'm going to just get a business, make $1 million, and then I won't ever need credit. I'll be rich and famous, or at least rich. And then the famous part really wasn't the concern, but the rich part was, and be able to live life and do things that I wanted to do. And at the age of 30, I got my act together. I was like, okay, maybe I need a more realistic approach to this. So I started to just get my finances in order. I had signed up for mint.com. Mint.com no longer exists, but at the time, mint.com did exist. And with mint.com, what it did was it tracked all of my expenses. It tracked all of my, well, income and expenses. So it gave me a running tabulation of how much money I was spending, where the money was going, what money I had coming in. And so it was the first step that I needed to really get my life in order. And so from there, I start to look at how do I do things that are increasing my income and decreasing my expenses. So I was looking at all sorts of ways I could decrease my expenses and looking at ways that I could increase my income. And so that was part of it. And that was mint.com. From there, I needed to get my credit straight because boy, oh boy, when I tell you I jacked up my credit, I jacked up my credit because I didn't really understand how to use credit at the time. I just used it irresponsibly. Had student loans. At first, I thought, oh, I'm never going to pay these student loans back. But then once I read a couple of books and figured out for me that real estate investing is probably going to be one of the pathways I need to move forward. And I do not have the cash to buy a house outright. So I was like, I need to get my credit in order. And that is what I did. It took me about 2.5, 3 years to get from age of 30 to 32, 33 when I bought my first property. But just to get my credit to a point of qualifying for a mortgage took 2 to 3 years of just working on my credit, battling with different creditors and trying to get things off of my credit. So it took about 3 years, but April 27th of 2015, I closed on my first home slash investment property. And as I said, or I mentioned, but I didn't go into detail earlier, this story could have easily been about Jonesboro because my first property I had under contract, and I used the VA home loan, by the way, which meant 0% down. But the first property I had under contract was not the duplex in Austell, but it was a quadplex in Jonesboro. I think it's called Burns Avenue. And so I had this quadplex under contract in Jonesboro, and I think it was under contract for 147, 145, something like that. And the appraisal came back at 95,000. And that is an issue that you face with multifamily properties, is that in some cases there's no comps to support the sales price. And even me as a licensed real estate broker, I've represented a client where we had offers that were nearly 100,000 above the appraised value, but the appraiser went off of what they could. Although we had multiple offers at anywhere to 80 to 100,000 above what the appraiser came back at, they went with what comps they had, and they had to go far. So the quadplex that my client was selling was in Stockbridge, and they were going as far as like Conyers to pull comps for that quadplex. And I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. But once again, I'm not the appraiser. So yeah, that's always been an issue when you talk about multifamily properties, getting accurate comps. So anyway, I had the property under contract for 145, appraised at 95,000, and so we had a $50,000 gap. Couldn't make that happen, and to me, that would have been a home run. And that's really what I was looking for. I was trying to see with the VA home loan, you can buy a single family up to a quadplex with the VA home loan. And so me, I wanted to start off it with a bang, and I wanted to get the most units that I could from the very beginning. And so I wanted a quadplex, but there are not many out there. And still today, there are not a lot out there. So anyway, that fell through, backed out of that contract. And then later on, I saw this duplex in Austell. And to me, I always tell my wife it wasn't a home run, but it got me on base. At the time, I was paying around $800 in rent, and I went from paying $800 in rent to $1 and some change in my mortgage payment. And how did that go about? First of all, I was paying $800 for a one bedroom apartment in Kennesaw at the time. And while I'm paying $800 a month for this apartment, with the mint that I was talking about, the one thing I was tracking was like, what are my largest expenses? And my number one expense was my housing expense. And I am always mixed up on which was number two and three. But I know it was food and auto expenses that were two and three. I don't know which came first. But housing was number one. So I tried to make wealth building very simple for myself. And so my thoughts were, am I doing something that increases my income? Am I doing something that decreases my expenses? And am I taking the difference and investing it wisely? So that is how simple I make building wealth. Just see, is what I'm doing increasing my income? Is what I'm doing decreasing my expenses? Am I investing the difference or my surplus wisely? And by cutting down on my housing, by buying a house, it was a way to cut down on both, to decrease my expenses, because I would, at that time, with the mortgage rates and the cost of houses, I went from paying $800 in rent to having a mortgage of $651 and some change. And fortunately, so I decreased my living expenses, but I also increased my income because my tenant paid $650 in rent. So when you deduct my mortgage payment, or my take my mortgage payment and deduct what the renter was paying to me, which was $650, I had $1 and some change that I had to personally pay to make up for the mortgage. So on April 27th, 2015, when I closed, it was a good day for me. But then May, so 4 days later, when the first of the month came around, all of a sudden I got a check for like 1,300 and some change, because I had got the rent from both of the units. Now, the VA had allowed me, or at least the mortgage company had allowed me 60 days to allow the one of the current tenants to move out before I moved in. So for those 2 months while they were still there, I was getting rent from both units. And so I'm living at a place, and I'm still living in my apartment where I'm paying 800, but then I'm also getting 1,300 and some change at the beginning of the month from rent from the two units, because it was like six something, whatever added up to 1,350, I believe it was. But from on May 1st, when I got that first rent payment, oh man, I knew it was real at that point in time. And I had fell in love with real estate from that point on, because I had heard about it for other people, but this was the first thing that was proven to me that it was real. And that, look, this is a legit way to build wealth, or to increase your income and hopefully build wealth. And since 2015. If the housing prices have went up drastically, and so has my equity in that first property, which I still own today. Yeah, without that first deal, I wouldn't have been able to, without getting on base, I wouldn't be to where I'm at today, which today I'm a licensed commercial real estate broker. I'm a licensed general contractor and developer working on a potential mixed use development in downtown Austell. But it all started from that first property that I purchased, that first duplex that I house hacked in Austell, Georgia, which I still own today. And yeah, just wanted to tell that story. I'm coming up on a 10-year anniversary of when I first got into real estate. And that also is 10 years of my company, Code Black Properties. Because the way I have my company set up is that Code Black Properties is my, I guess, my parent company, for lack of better words. It is our real estate investment and development company. And then underneath that, I have Cafe Realty, which is our commercial real estate brokerage, and then Code Black Construction, which is our construction company. And so all of this started from Code Black Properties, which I started a couple of months after I got my first property, because I knew from day one, okay, this is something that I'm going to be into for a long time. Because, like I said, that once I closed and I got that first check, I was hooked. And almost 10 years later, well, 10 years and a couple of months, I can still say I'm absolutely even more enthralled in the real estate investment and development space today than I was back when I first bought my properties. And so it's just a love of mine that keeps on giving. And so hopefully, if you are newer or you're someone who's dabbled in it before, hopefully you can have the same joy that I have from real estate, because it's just such a creative field. It allows you. It's so complex. There's never anything that's the same. It allows you to think at high levels. Uh, it's just a field that encompasses everything that we all do, everything from where we stay to the places we work to the places we hang out, places we eat, places we go for entertainment, everything, the roads that we drive on, the parks, and all of this is real estate. And so it's just, the world is your playground in the real estate field. And it all started with a first property. So comment below if you are, well, first of all, don't forget to comment and subscribe. I've planned to do some more videos. Let me know what you want to hear about. Also, I want to shout out the people who called, because I did a video on how and why I got my contractor's license. And I actually got calls in real life from people asking me about how I got my contractor's license. So I will definitely do some more videos on the contractor's license, because you guys actually called me up in person to get more information on it. So I'll definitely do some more videos on that. But if you have any other things that you want to hear about, please let me know. But right now I have to go, because I have some contracts to write up for some property for sale, and some properties that I'm going to be listing in Atlanta and Cairo, Georgia. And I have a contract for some renovation work in Smyrna. So I got to write these contracts up and get out here and make this money. Yeah. Stay tuned, and I'll see you on the next video.